Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into a world where cleverness counts more than strength, and where dusty cobblestone paths lead you to stories you didn't expect. Imagine yourself wandering down a narrow village road, the kind where chickens strut across like they own the real estate, and every shuttered window creaks with secrets. The evening is soft, the kind that makes you think maybe the stars themselves are eavesdropping. You probably won't survive this because, let's face it, you'll drift off to sleep before the first goat even bleats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always find it fun to imagine this little story rolling across time zones like a wandering bard. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You step onto a road that looks like it hasn't changed in centuries. The cobblestones underfoot are uneven, the kind that make you wobble a little, as though the path itself is testing your balance. On either side, the cottages lean inward, gossiping about you through their crooked beams. The scent of wood smoke clings to the air, tangled with something sweet. Fresh honey cakes cooling on a windowsill you'll never be offered. Typical. Children laugh somewhere, chasing each other around barrels, their voices bouncing down the lane like stray marbles. You notice that even their games carry a rhythm, chanting rhymes older than the houses themselves. Historians often point out that village songs, even silly ones, are some of the oldest oral traditions, passed down like slightly dented heirlooms. Folklorists, of course, argue endlessly about whether the words really preserve ancient rituals, or if kids just like making up nonsense that rhymes with goose. Either way, it lingers with a sort of timeless weight. You pass a field at the edge of the village, where the crops stand tall, golden stalks swaying gently like a congregation. A scarecrow leans in the middle, tilted hat, one button eye hanging loose. For a second, it looks as though it nods at you. Of course, that could just be the breeze, or the fact that scarecrows have always had a knack for unsettling politeness. Did you know in medieval Europe, some farmers actually dressed scarecrows in their old Sunday best, believing it made them more authoritative to the crows? Imagine your grandpa's stiff church suit terrifying a flock of birds. Stylish and functional. As you keep walking, the road forks. One side disappears into the forest, dark and promising. The other winds toward the castle on the hill. The castle doesn't look particularly menacing. It's more like a giant loaf of bread, crusty and uneven, baked into the skyline. Still, it's the kind of place where decisions are made that trickle down to affect the humblest farmer and his clever daughter. And tonight, you're here for them, not the nobility. There's a bench by the road, worn smooth by centuries of tired travelers. You take a seat, letting the wooden slats press into your back, and listen to the hum of the village settling down for the night. The smith's hammer has stopped. The geese have waddled home. Somewhere, a fiddler plays a slow tune, the kind you can almost smell, warm, spiced, a little melancholic. Scholars still debate whether these kinds of rural tunes influenced the earliest written fairy tales, or if the written versions just borrowed the mood of music already drifting through the villages. Either way, you're inside that melody now, wrapped in it like a blanket that smells faintly of hay and nostalgia. And maybe it's just the way dusk paints everything softer, but you can sense that something peculiar is about to stir in this quiet town. Stories don't arrive with fireworks. They sneak in on the hush of evening, walking the same road you do, waiting for you to notice.
The castle loaf on the hill isn't just decoration. It's the seat of a king with a flair for dramatic bargains. He isn't cruel, exactly, but he has that aristocratic hobby of setting impossible challenges for his subjects, as though riddles were attacks. You wander up the slope, shoes scuffing dust, and the air thins into something sharper, like it's been filtered through a judge's robe. The king himself is perched on a throne that looks suspiciously uncomfortable, all straight angles and stiff carvings, as though carpenters believed royal dignity thrived on back pain. His beard drapes down like a waterfall that ran out of enthusiasm halfway. You've seen this kind of character before, the kind who loves the sound of his own decrees. And tonight's decree? A riddle that no villager dares answer. "Bring me something that belongs to you and not to you," he demands, voice echoing off stone walls. The words hang there, absurd and smug, like a professor's trick exam question. You'd expect gasps from the crowd, but mostly you get awkward coughs and the faint squeak of a chair leg across the chamber floor. Here's the thing. Medieval monarchs really did enjoy tossing around brain teasers. History nerds point out that in some European courts, solving riddles was considered proof of divine favor, like your cleverness was a receipt from heaven. On the other hand, some scholars argue it was just a way to keep peasants humble, forcing them to puzzle instead of revolt. Either way, the stakes were high enough to make the room sweat. The farmer, standing near the back, shuffles nervously. His clothes are patched but tidy, the kind that say, "I try, but life has other plans." He knows the riddle is a trap. If he guesses wrong, he risks losing his land, maybe even his freedom. His clever daughter, however, tilts her head and smirks, already unraveling the king's words like yarn from an old sweater. You notice the other villagers avoiding eye contact with her, as though intelligence might be contagious and they don't want the side effects. Folklorists still debate whether these tales of clever peasant daughters were based on real village traditions or if they were literary inventions to amuse bored nobles. Some say these characters were rooted in local women who actually solved disputes or managed farms with quiet authority. Others insist the stories were just fantasies that allowed men to laugh at the idea of a girl being sharper than a king. Personally, you're rooting for option one. The king repeats the riddle with more gusto, clearly enjoying himself. "Yours yet not yours. Think well, my subjects." His eyes gleam like a cat who just pushed a vase off the shelf. You half expect him to start handing out Scantron sheets and number 2 quills. Meanwhile, a breeze curls through the chamber, lifting banners and rattling chains, as though the building itself is tired of this nonsense. And you? You're caught between admiration for the absurdity and the suspicion that this riddle will grow teeth before long. And here's the joke. Kings rarely expected answers. They expected silence. But tonight, silence isn't going to hold, because somewhere, behind you, a girl is about to speak, and when she does, she'll tilt the entire story like a chessboard tipped by accident.
You step back down from the hill toward the marketplace, because news travels faster than any royal decree when bread ovens are involved. The cobblestones under your feet seem to buzz with whispers, carrying the latest riddle like gossip about a neighbor's embarrassing laundry accident. By the time you reach the heart of the village, the impossible challenge is already woven into every conversation. The marketplace is alive, though not loud, more like a cat's purr than a lion's roar. Stalls lean together in crooked rows, shaded by fabric awnings that flutter lazily in the breeze. Baskets overflow with onions, cabbages, and turnips the size of cannonballs. Somewhere, a wheel of cheese sits in the sun, sweating like it regrets life choices. The smell of baked bread coils through the air, warm and inviting, wrapping itself around you like a scarf you didn't know you needed. It's here that you first hear her name slip into the chatter, the farmer's daughter. No one says it too loudly. It's as if the syllables themselves are made of glass, fragile but sharp. A group of washerwomen pause mid-gossip, lowering their voices as though conspirators. A shepherd leans on his crook, smiling like he already knows how this story ends. Rumors cling to her reputation. Cleverer than a court scholar, quick as a fox, bold enough to laugh where others tremble. Now, a little historical aside, tales of clever daughters weren't unique to this village. Folklorists trace them across Europe, from the Baltic to the Balkans. Sometimes the girl solved riddles, sometimes she outwitted trolls, and sometimes she just reminded a pompous noble that you can't shear wool from a goat twice. Scholars still argue if these tales reflected admiration for women's wit in daily life, or if they were meant to poke fun at men by using women as the mouthpiece of common sense. Either way, the farmer's daughter you're hearing about now feels less like fiction and more like someone who's already rolled up her sleeves for the king's nonsense. The chatter thickens as merchants haggle half-heartedly. A fishmonger waves a slippery trout like punctuation to his story about how she once silenced a tax collector with a single question. Next to him, a potter insists she can solve riddles before breakfast, between feeding chickens and mending socks. You get the impression that even if none of this is true, it's true enough for the villagers who need a hero. You pause at a bakery stall, unable to resist the smell of rye loaves still steaming. The baker, flour dusted into her eyebrows like frosted paint, shakes her head when you mention the riddle. The king thinks he's clever, she mutters, sliding a loaf into your hands as if conspiratorial carbs are part of the plot. But the girl's cleverer, you'll see. And just like that, the marketplace hums with anticipation. Every whispered word, every exchanged glance carries the same quiet certainty. The farmer's daughter won't just answer the riddle. She'll bend it into something the king didn't expect. The church bell tolls the hour, lazy and deep, echoing through the square. You stand among the villagers, clutching your warm bread, and realize you've stumbled into a story that isn't just told, it's lived. The kind where laughter, fear, and hope mingle like scents in the market air, impossible to separate. Somewhere in the crowd, you catch sight of her, a young woman balancing a basket on her hip, scanning the square with calm amusement. It's not arrogance, it's the look of someone who already knows how tonight's game will end. And if you're lucky, you'll get to watch her play.
The market buzz fades into evening, and you follow the thread of whispers straight toward the farmhouse at the edge of the fields. It's nothing remarkable at first glance, just a timber-framed cottage with a slanted roof, smoke curling politely from the chimney. Chickens scratch in the yard as though they own stock in the place, and a goat chews on the fence post with the slow determination of someone chewing through life's problems. Inside, you find the farmer and his daughter seated at a rough-hewn table. The farmer's hands are knotted with calluses, his face weathered like old leather that's seen too many seasons. His worry sits on him heavy, like a cloak he can't shrug off. He mutters about the riddle, about land that could be lost, about the way kings always ask for the impossible while eating figs imported from who knows where. But his daughter? She listens with a smile tugging at the corners of her lips, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the tabletop. There's no panic in her expression, just that sparkle people get when they're about to tell a joke they know will land perfectly. "Father," she says, with a calmness that hushes even the clucking hens outside, "riddles are only knots in words. You pull the right thread, and they come loose." And then comes the first test of wit. The farmer, perhaps just to ease his nerves, tosses little questions her way. "What weighs nothing but can sink a ship?" he asks, eyes narrowing in mock seriousness. Without missing a beat, she answers, "A promise." He chuckles despite himself. "What runs without feet?" he tries again. She glances toward the window, where a small brook gurgles beyond the fence, and replies, "The water that won't stay still." Her words land with a rhythm, smooth as honey sliding off a spoon. You realize that her wit isn't just clever, it's comforting, a balm that untangles her father's fear. And it's funny, too, because every now and then she throws in a playful jab. When he asks, "What grows when it eats and dies when it drinks?" she smirks and says, "A fire? Or maybe your appetite at supper."
Historically, riddles weren't only for nobles. They thrived in everyday life. Scholars note that medieval villages often exchanged riddles at gatherings, partly for entertainment, partly as a way to test one's sharpness. Some riddles survive in manuscripts, strange little time capsules, while others drifted like smoke into forgotten nights. Folklorists debate whether these oral riddles shaped the literary versions or if it was the other way around, if the tales of clever daughters sent echoes back into the villages, inspiring games by hearthlight. Either way, tonight you're seeing both at once. A village girl wielding wit like a sword, and a story that already feels older than the walls around her. As the fire crackles, you catch the faint sound of villagers gathering outside, pretending to need water from the well or hay for the animals, when really they just want to hear the girl sharpen her words. She lets them listen, knowing full well that tomorrow the king's riddle will be answered, and that her village will be the safest place to stand when it happens. The farmer leans back finally, sighing, his shoulders lighter than before. He knows, as you do, that his daughter has already unraveled the impossible. It's just a matter of time before she does it for everyone to see.
Morning comes in with a pale light, spilling across the fields like milk tipped from a jug. You follow the narrow track toward the meadow, and there, waiting as though he's always belonged, is the peculiar stranger. At first glance, he seems nothing more than a traveler. Cloak patched with mismatched fabric, hat tugged low over shadowed eyes. But the longer you look, the more the details betray him. His boots leave no prints in the damp grass. His breath curls into the air without warmth, and his eyes, when they catch the sunlight, flicker with colors no human iris should hold, like a candle flame struggling in a draught. The villagers keep their distance. They pretend to go about their chores, though their glances keep straying toward the meadow, like moths too cautious to fly into the lantern. They whisper, a claiming spirit. Old stories say these beings appear when land is at stake, eager to twist bargains in their favor. They don't swing swords or hurl fire. They simply argue, reshaping words until the world bends to their advantage, which, honestly, makes them the original lawyers. The farmer stiffens at the sight of the spirit, his hand tightening around his hoe as though wood and iron could stand against trickery. His daughter, though, doesn't flinch. She tilts her head, as though steadying an unusual bird that's wandered into the wrong season. "You claim my father's field?" she asks, voice steady, with just enough curiosity to sound like she's giving him a chance to make himself a fool. The spirit's mouth twists into something halfway between a smile and a smirk. "By ancient right," he replies, his words rolling smooth as polished stones. "This land is owed to me. The king's riddle will decide it, and you mortals will find yourselves lacking." His tone carries that smugness of someone who has never lost a board game because they changed the rules halfway through. Here's a bit of context. European folklore is filled with spirits who thrive on claims and bargains. Nixies, kobolds, brownies, even wandering fae. They don't always want gold or blood. Often they hunger for property, promises, or a single careless word. Historians note that these tales often reflected very real disputes over land in medieval times, when peasants could lose everything to lords or laws they barely understood. Folklorists can't agree, though, whether the spirits were symbolic warnings about feudal greed or whether people genuinely believed the otherworldly had contracts waiting in their pockets. The daughter listens, arms crossed, her eyes flicking toward the field behind her. The soil is dark and rich, furrows stretching straight as rows in a hymn. It's more than land. It's survival, memory, identity.
and she isn't about to let a flickering-eyed stranger claim it with clever phrasing. "Ancient right?" she repeats, raising one brow. "If it's so ancient, then surely you should remember the rules better than I." Her words are light, but they land sharp, and for a flicker of a moment, the spirit's flame-colored eyes dim just slightly. And you, watching from the edge of the meadow, realize that what you're witnessing isn't just a confrontation. It's a chess match played with sentences, where every pause and every smile is a move. One slip, one misplaced word, and the board tips entirely. The daughter knows this, and judging by the faint curl of amusement on her lips, she plans not just to hold her ground, but to turn the spirit's game against him.
The air still holds the spirit's last words, sharp and brittle as icicles, but the daughter doesn't seem bothered. She's stirring a pot over the hearth that evening, steam curling upward like it's listening in. Her father paces the room, muttering about doom and forfeited land, while the chickens outside cluck as though gossiping about their human landlord's fate. She sets down the ladle, smoothing her apron with deliberate calm. "Father," she says, "spirits thrive on haste. If you rush to answer, they'll twist your words into knots you can't untangle. But if you wait, just breathe and wait, their cleverness wears thin." She doesn't raise her voice, yet the timbre carries authority, as though she's reciting something older than the house itself. You notice how she works her thoughts like embroidery, carefully, patiently, knot by knot. Each pause is a stitch, each idea a thread. And while her father frets about oxen and harvests, she's already arranging her defense like a seamstress laying out fabric before cutting. She pulls from memory little stories she's gathered, fables from traveling peddlers, riddles whispered by shepherds on the hills, even nonsense rhymes taught by children in the square. To her, they're not scraps, they're tools. "Words are doors," she says quietly, her fingers tracing the grain of the table. "If you know the hinge, you can open them any way you like." There's humor in her too, sharp and playful. When her father moans that the spirit will twist everything to his advantage, she smirks, "Then I'll twist it back, like wringing laundry, only with less smell." He groans, but you catch the ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. A little history sneaks in here. Many European tales praised patience and wit as weapons stronger than swords. Folklorists often point out that clever daughters and wise maidens appear across dozens of cultures, serving as proof that wisdom wasn't bound by gender, even if power was. Scholars argue, though, whether these tales were empowering or just token exceptions, offered as entertainment rather than genuine acknowledgement. The debate lingers, much like the stew's aroma in this cottage. Outside, the night deepens. Stars scatter themselves generously across the sky, and the moon, pale and thoughtful, hangs like an overseer of riddles. The daughter steps out to the doorway, arms folded, eyes fixed on that silver coin in the heavens. You follow her gaze, and for a moment it feels as if she's conversing with the sky itself, rehearsing her counters with patient confidence. Behind her, the farmhouse creaks with the sound of settling beams, as though the very house believes in her. And maybe it does. After all, houses have long memories, and this one seems to know it shelters a girl who can thread words tighter than any spirit's claim. By the time she returns inside, her plan is set. Not a grand scheme of trickery, not a sword fight of magical power, but a quiet confidence, the kind you bring to a game you've already decided to win.
The night passes quietly, though you can almost hear the spirit pacing in the meadow, restless as smoke. When dawn arrives, pale and damp, the village stirs early. You trail along behind the farmer and his daughter as they walk toward the king's hall. The cobblestones are slick with dew, each stone glistening like a jewel in the morning light. Chickens cluck as if delivering commentary, probably something like, "She'd better win, we like this yard." Inside the hall, the king sits upon his stiff throne again, beard smoothed down with unnecessary pomp. He waves his hand, commanding silence, though honestly no one was talking loud enough to warrant it. The peculiar spirit stands smugly at the side, his flickering eyes dim in the daylight, but no less unsettling. He waits like someone convinced the ending has already been written. The king clears his throat and repeats his riddle. "Bring me what is yours and yet not yours." The words hang heavy, like damp laundry that refuses to dry. The crowd shifts uneasily, all eyes sliding toward the farmer and his daughter. She steps forward with a calm that makes the air itself hush. In her hands, she carries a loaf of bread, still warm from the hearth. Its crust is golden, its scent drifting like comfort itself through the tense chamber. She kneels, placing the bread at the king's feet, and then speaks. "This bread, sire, is ours. My father's wheat grew it, my hands kneaded it, and our fire baked it. Yet it is not ours, for by tomorrow it will belong to the bellies of those who eat it, and then it will belong to none at all." The words ripple through the hall like a bell toll, clear and resonant. A murmur rises among the villagers. Even the guards, who usually look like carved statues with mild indigestion, allow themselves the hint of a nod. The spirit scowls, his lips twisting. He tries to interject, but she is not finished. She looks up at the king, eyes steady. "What is ours and not ours is everything we tend in this life. Land, bread, even breath. We hold it only for a time, never forever." And there it is, the thread pulled loose, the knot undone. The king leans back, stroking his beard with the theatrics of a man who pretends he was never stumped. Historically, riddles like this often dealt with paradoxes, things held in tension, both true and not true. Folklorists trace these themes to medieval philosophy, where scholars wrestled with questions of ownership and mortality. But some argue that riddles like this were less profound and more about wordplay, like medieval dad jokes dressed up in silk. Either way, you're watching a tradition come alive right here, with bread as the mic drop. The villagers exchange delighted glances, shoulders lifting as though a great weight has been shrugged off. The farmer stares at his daughter in awe, muttering something about never again doubting her wit or her ability to bake a loaf worth a royal decree. And you, standing there in the crowd, feel the tide turn. The claiming spirit may have thought himself clever, but the girl just proved that cleverness isn't about twisting words until they break. It's about weaving them into truth, simple and undeniable, like the taste of warm bread in hungry mouths. The spirit does not take defeat kindly. His flame-colored eyes flicker darker now, like embers smothered by ash. He slithers forward across the hall, words dripping from his mouth as though each syllable has been sharpened. "A trick," he hisses. "Bread is too common a thing to satisfy an ancient riddle." The villagers recoil, some clutching rosaries, others just holding on to each other. The farmer grips his cap like it's a shield, but his daughter, she doesn't so much as blink. Instead, she tilts her head the way you might at a toddler throwing a tantrum in the cereal aisle. "You wanted an answer," she replies softly, her tones steady as the slow drip of honey. "You did not say it must be rare or gilded. Bread feeds all, even kings. It belongs to everyone, yet to no one. It is ours, yet not ours. The riddle is answered." Her calm laughter floats into the silence, gentle but firm, the kind that makes arrogance look small. You almost feel sorry for the spirit. Almost. His face twists, searching for another angle, some loophole to claw back his advantage. But like a lawyer who's realized the jury has stopped listening, he sputters and stalls. Folklorists have long argued over spirits like this. Were they meant to represent greed, bureaucracy, or the untrustworthy nature of contracts? Some say these tales were coded warnings against landlords who toyed with tenants' livelihoods. Others claim they were reminders that cunning, especially from unexpected sources like a farmer's daughter, could undo even the most intimidating power. Scholars can't agree whether the laughter in these stories was meant to comfort peasants or to gently mock those in charge. Either way, the sound of her laughter now is worth more than any written decree. The king leans forward, one eyebrow arched, clearly amused by the spectacle. "It seems," he says, stroking his beard with theatrical gravitas, "that the girl has bested you. Do you wish to challenge her again?" The spirit bristles. His form flickers faintly, edges blurring, as though daylight itself is beginning to disagree with his existence. He snaps his cloak around himself and snarls, "I will have another riddle for her, one that cannot be untangled with bread or clever words." The crowd murmurs, half fearful, half eager, because deep down, people love a rematch, even if the stakes are life and land. The daughter simply folds her hands, that small smile still playing at her lips. "Then bring your best," she says, as if inviting him to tea rather than to battle. And you, standing among the villagers, realize what's happening. The spirit's fury isn't just bluster, it's desperation. He's unraveling, thread by thread, every time she turns his menace into comedy. You've seen this before, haven't you? The bully in the schoolyard, undone not by fists, but by someone who laughs at the right moment. It's oddly satisfying. The spirit, cornered by her wit, retreats in a swirl of smoke toward the doors of the hall. "Under moonlight," he hisses, voice echoing. "There your cleverness will falter." The doors slam shut with a bang, sending dust drifting from the rafters. Silence settles again, broken only by the shuffle of the villagers' feet and one old man coughing like the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. The daughter exhales, her calm intact. "Moonlight, then," she says, turning toward her father, and though the spirit promised fury, she speaks as though the coming trial were nothing more than a bedtime puzzle waiting to be solved.
That night, the meadow breathes silver. Moonlight spills across the grass, turning every blade into a tiny sword. The village sleeps uneasily, but you, along with the farmer's daughter, step into the open air where the spirit has promised his rematch. It's the kind of night where the silence itself feels alive, like it's waiting for someone to slip. The spirit is already there, cloaked in shadow, his eyes smoldering brighter now that the moon feeds him. He looks less human this time, his edges wavering like a candle flame caught in a draft. "We meet again," he says, voice low and serpentine. "Answer this, clever one. What shines brighter the more you take away, yet disappears if you give it freely?" The riddle hangs heavy, curling like mist around your ankles. The farmer stiffens, his breath shallow, but his daughter only kneels to touch the damp grass, thinking. Her calm is unsettling, the way someone might pause before delivering the punchline of a joke. "Light," she says at last, her voice gentle. "The more you take away the darkness, the brighter it shines. But if you give away all light, even the flame dies." She looks up at the spirit, and her smile is so calm it feels like a shield.
The spirit hisses, clearly dissatisfied. "Another riddle, then. Answer me this. What belongs to all, but is owned by none, yet can be stolen with a whisper?" She leans back on her heels, letting the moonlight paint her hair silver. "A secret?" she replies softly. "We each hold them, but no one owns them, and when spoken, they're gone." The villagers who crept to the meadow's edge gasp. Some cover their mouths as if their own secrets might tumble out. The spirit's face twists, his flickering outline bending, as though her words weigh more than his form can carry. Now, here's where folklore slides in again. Moonlit trials appear often in European stories. They carry the idea that truth reveals itself in half-light, where shadows are long and certainty is slippery. Some historians argue these scenes symbolize negotiation between the known and the unknown, the human and the otherworldly. Folklorists, though, still debate whether moonlight in such tales was meant to signify vulnerability or clarity. Tonight, watching this clever girl turn riddles inside out, you'd vote for clarity. The spirit's frustration simmers. He stamps the earth, and the grass blackens under his step. But every move he makes, every new riddle, she unwinds with steady humor. When he demands, "What runs faster than horses but leaves no track?" she chuckles and answers, "Your temper." Even the goats at the field's edge bleat as though agreeing. And as the moon rises higher, something shifts. The spirit's fury no longer terrifies the crowd, it entertains them. His once menacing riddles have become a comedy routine he didn't sign up for. You realize he's losing, not just the contest, but the dignity that made him dangerous. The daughter rises finally, brushing dew from her dress. "You said my cleverness would falter under moonlight, but it shines brighter here. Perhaps you should be careful what you summon in the dark." The spirit snarls, his form trembling. He vanishes into smoke that curls upward into the night sky, leaving behind nothing but the faint smell of singed grass and an audience of wide-eyed villagers who suddenly believe the girl might be clever enough to outwit the stars themselves.
The next morning, the meadow still glistens with dew, but now it carries a new kind of shimmer, the echo of laughter and murmured retellings. Villagers huddle in doorways, kneading dough, sweeping stoops, and whispering about the girl who out-talked a spirit by moonlight. It's the sort of tale that gains embroidery with each telling. By breakfast, she's not just clever, she's half prophet, half trickster, and possibly part goose, depending on who you ask. You walk through the village with her story in your pocket, feeling how it hums against your ribs. This is where folklore lingers, not in palaces or grand halls, but in the daily rhythm of market chatter and spilled ale. And this particular rhythm? The clever daughter archetype. European villages loved these stories like they loved butter on bread. From Germany's Clever Elsie to Norway's The Ash Lad's Sister, tales of witty women outsmarting lords, kings, or wandering spirits filled evenings with nods and chuckles. One mainstream fact: the Brothers Grimm, those tireless collectors of bedtime fuel, devoted whole sections of their work to such clever girl tales. They noticed how common they were across towns, and how often women in these stories held the sharper end of the stick. A quirky tidbit: in some French countryside versions, the clever daughter doesn't just solve riddles, she becomes a judge in disguise, settling disputes while the king pretends not to notice. Imagine showing up in court and realizing your neighbor's daughter is quietly deciding if you get to keep your cow. Of course, scholars still argue over what these tales meant. Were they sly forms of social protest, suggesting women could outthink patriarchal authority? Or were they cozy jokes meant only to draw laughter before bed? The debate never sleeps. But maybe that's the point. Like a spirit under moonlight, the story is supposed to keep moving. You catch yourself smiling at how modern the humor feels. The farmer's daughter cracks jokes at riddles like someone roasting a heckler at a comedy club. And maybe that's why the tales stuck. They gave people permission to laugh at authority, to imagine a girl with nothing but sharp words could stand taller than a spirit or a king. As the day drifts on, you overhear one villager muttering, "She should be queen one day, mark my words." Another snorts, "Or at least mayor of the goats." You think of last night's goat chorus and decide he might have a point. The girl herself? She doesn't bask in the praise. She's back at her chores, sweeping the farmhouse threshold as if spirits and riddles were no more troublesome than stray dust. That's the secret charm of these heroines. They never think themselves extraordinary. It's everyone else who can't stop staring. And you, still wandering, realize this. The real enchantment isn't the spirits vanishing or the moonlit riddle duel. It's the way a simple story swells, binding a community tighter, reminding them that wit and laughter can be as protective as any sword.
Evening falls again, this time with the glow of torches lighting a path toward the king's hall. You trail behind the farmer's daughter as she makes her way, the hem of her dress brushing against the dusty stones. There's a buzz in the air, half curiosity, half nervous laughter. It's not every day a girl from a farmhouse gets summoned to the royal court to match wits with a creature no one dares name too loudly. Inside, the hall smells of beeswax and roasted meat, though the food has long since cooled. Nobles cluster around, silk sleeves brushing shoulders, their whispers like dry leaves skittering across stone. And there at the front, perched with that strange stillness, waits the claiming spirit. His eyes gleam faintly, as if he's carrying a pocket full of stars that never learned manners. The king sits on his throne, a little too stiff, like someone pretending to enjoy a chair that pinches. He gestures for silence. "Tonight," he declares, "a final challenge will decide who speaks truth, this spirit of claim or the daughter of the farmer." You stand at the edges, pretending not to notice how every guard is clutching a spear just slightly too tightly. The girl, by contrast, looks around as though she's only here to borrow sugar. She curtsies, then smirks at the spirit. You can almost hear her thinking, "All right, let's dance." The spirit begins. His voice drips with a strange weight, half stone, half shadow. He presents a dilemma. "Tell me, clever one, if I demand what is dearest to you, and you refuse, does that not prove it was never yours to begin with?" The crowd gasps. It sounds clever, dangerously clever. But the girl tilts her head as though he's just asked whether water is wet. "Dearest things," she says softly, "are never possessions. They are moments, memories, people. If you demand them, you prove only that you cannot keep them. My father's laugh at dawn is mine as long as it's shared, and no spirit can bottle it." You hear a snort from somewhere in the back. Maybe one of the guards. Maybe the goat from earlier sneaked in. Either way, the tension cracks for just a second. One mainstream historical note: medieval courts loved riddling contests. Kings of England, Germany, and even Byzantium are recorded as hosting them, part entertainment, part test of wit. The court jester wasn't the only one delivering punchlines. Sometimes queens and noblewomen joined, making everyone squirm. Quirky tidbit. In a Scandinavian version of a clever daughter story, the girl is told to appear before the king neither dressed nor naked, neither riding nor walking. She shows up wrapped in a fishing net, riding a goat while her toes scrape the ground. That's the sort of absurdity even modern stand-up comics would admire. And the scholarly debate? Well, some say these tales were secretly teaching political skills, showing common folk how to argue cleverly against unfair taxes or land claims. Others say they were just plain fun, bedtime riddles with no hidden agenda. The truth, like most riddles, probably lies somewhere in the laughter. Back in the hall, the spirit frowns. His clever mask wobbles. He tries again, weaving another challenge about what belongs to no one, yet everyone demands. The girl meets it with a shrug. Sleep. We all seek it, but none can hold it. And right now, your questions are delaying mine. The nobles chuckle. The king hides a smile in his sleeve, and you feel the tide turning. The farmer's daughter is not just winning, she's rewriting the very rules. And the spirit, for the first time, looks unsure of his own shadow. The hall feels warmer now, as though a fire has been stoked, not in the hearth, but in the people themselves. You watch as the farmer's daughter keeps standing there, calm as bread dough rising in the oven, while the claiming spirit flickers with something that might be irritation. Or maybe that's just how shadows look when they're embarrassed. He leans forward, voice dropping low enough to make the air buzz. "If you are so clever," he murmurs, "then answer this. What belongs to the king, yet he cannot claim it, and if I take it, he will be lessened forever?" It's a heavy question. The nobles murmur like bees stirred from a hive. The king stiffens, his knuckles tightening on the carved arms of his chair. You half expect the daughter to stall, maybe ask for parchment and a latte. But no, she grins. The kind of grin that says she's about to pull a rabbit out of a hat, even though rabbits weren't invited. "Respect," she answers plainly. "A king holds it by the grace of his people. If you steal it, he is diminished. But you can't keep it either. It will wither in your hands like a flower without soil." The silence that follows is sharp enough to slice bread. Then, almost against their will, the nobles break into applause. Not thunderous, this is still a court after all, but enough to ripple through the hall like cautious rain on a still pond. The spirit narrows his eyes. For a moment, you wonder if he'll lash out, dissolve into smoke, or call in reinforcements. Instead, he gives a slow, creaking laugh, like a windmill turning on a day with barely any wind. "You are bold," he admits, "but boldness does not always win." Historical fact for tonight's pocket of trivia. In medieval Europe, spirits, demons, and even trickster figures were often portrayed as clever, but ultimately undone by human wit or divine favor. Think of it as a cultural pep talk. Folks hearing these tales wanted reassurance that intelligence could outmaneuver brute or supernatural force. Odd tidbit. In some early German folk tales, spirits or devils who lost such contests were bound to serve the clever mortal, sometimes for a year, sometimes for 7. That's a strange punishment, isn't it? One day you're a powerful being, the next year's scrubbing turnip pods for a farmer's family. And the scholarly debate? Some folklorists argue that these contests were veiled critiques of feudal law, where peasants often lost disputes to landlords by default. Stories like this gave the powerless an imaginative victory, flipping the script for at least one night by the fire. Back in the hall, the king finally leans forward. His voice, firm but tinged with relief, fills the air. It seems the daughter has answered every question set before her. "Spirit, what claim have you left to make?" The claiming spirit hesitates. His shoulders, or whatever passes for shoulders, shift uneasily. He looks around, as if searching for an escape hatch, or perhaps a helpful gremlin to shout hints from the rafters, but none come.
Then, with a sigh like wind in the rafters of an empty barn, he bows his head. None, he admits. She has won. You feel the air in the hall loosen, like everyone collectively exhaled after holding their breath far too long. Guards lower their spears. A noblewoman fans herself dramatically, as if she alone kept the place from collapsing. Even the goat, you swear it really is here now, bleats in triumph. And the farmer's daughter? She just smooths her skirt and glances at the king as though asking, "What's for supper?"
The claiming spirit doesn't vanish in a puff of smoke. No thunderclap, no dramatic fireworks. He just shrinks. Not physically, though you swear for a heartbeat his outline blurs like chalk in the rain. Mostly he seems smaller because his presence, once pressing down like a heavy quilt in summer, eases away. He mutters something under his breath, probably not "good game, see you at trivia night," and drifts toward the hall's shadows, where he melts into the dark as if retreating into some unseen crack in the world. The silence that follows is a strange one. It's not the tense, expectant hush of moments earlier. This one is soft, curious, filled with people testing their voices again, clearing throats, whispering to neighbors, rustling silk sleeves. You notice the king watching his hall as though he's seeing it fresh, like a man realizing his crown is a bit heavier than it looked in the mirror this morning. Then he rises. The nobles scramble to follow, a rustle of gowns and boots echoing like 100 anxious birds flapping at once. "Tonight," he declares, "a peasant girl has preserved the dignity of the crown. She has outwitted a force that would have claimed what is not its own. Such cleverness deserves reward." You'd think he'd stop there, but kings do enjoy their theatrics. He waves a hand, and suddenly a velvet cushion is brought forth, bearing a ring. It's not enormous, no cartoonish gem wobbling on top, but it glimmers with the kind of quiet authority that says, this belongs to someone with a really big castle. The daughter shall not return to her father's fields unless she wishes. She shall have a place here, in my court, as one whose words carry wisdom. Now here's the tricky part. You've seen this story enough times to know that a place in the court can either be a blessing or a gilded cage. Imagine getting free food, sure, but also sitting through endless banquets where nobles argue about whose swan is puffier. Still, the daughter bows gracefully. She's smart enough to play along, for now. Historical fun fact. In real medieval Europe, kings and rulers sometimes kept wise fools or clever commoners in their courts, people whose role was to speak truths wrapped in wit, jokes, or riddles. Unlike sycophantic courtiers, these figures could poke holes in royal pomposity, often saying what others dared not. The farmer's daughter in this story slots neatly into that archetype, the one allowed to be blunt without losing her head. Here's a quirky tidbit you might not know. Some courts actually employed riddle contests as a form of entertainment, not just between nobles, but between rulers and guests. Think of it as an elite open mic night, minus the awkward guitar solos. A clever riddle could win favor, or, in at least one Scandinavian tale, save a life. And here's where scholars still argue. Was this story originally a clever peasant tale, meant to uplift the common folk by showing that brains can outmatch both spirits and kings? Or was it adapted later to reinforce royal authority by showing a king wise enough to reward wit? Folklorists toss the debate around like a hot potato. No one agrees, but everyone enjoys the potato. Back in the hall, you notice the farmer himself, shoulders stooped, cap in hand, looking like he's just walked into the fanciest bakery in town with mud on his boots. Pride swells in his eyes, though, watching his daughter stand tall. She catches his gaze, and with the tiniest nod, promises him silently that she won't forget where she came from. The king raises his goblet, nobles follow, and for a moment, The hall shimmers with golden light, laughter, and the sense of a story already halfway on its way to becoming a legend. You can almost hear the future bards sharpening their lutes.
The hall slowly empties, like a tide retreating after a storm. Nobles whisper among themselves, voices curling up the carved rafters like smoke. Servants scurry to collect half-drained goblets and crumbs of feasts left behind, the quiet clink-clink of silver on trays filling the silence. And there you are, watching the farmer's daughter, still steady, still standing, as though she's rooted herself like an oak in the polished stone floor. When the king finally dismisses her, she doesn't leap at the chance to lounge in a velvet chamber. Instead, she asks the steward for a moment outside. You follow her steps into the courtyard, where the night air is crisp, clean, and fragrant with late summer blossoms. The stars overhead scatter themselves with careless extravagance, as if someone spilled a bag of sugar on black velvet. She breathes in deeply, then laughs quietly, a soft, relieved sound. "Outwitting a spirit wasn't on my to-do list this week," she muttered, half to herself, half to the cicadas. And there's the humanity of it. She may have stood like a legend in the hall, but outside she's just a clever, tired girl from a farm, leaning against a stone wall as if to remind herself she's still real. Her father joins her, cap twisting nervously in his hands. "They'll want you here now," he says, his voice both proud and worried. "But remember, home will always be waiting. Chickens don't feed themselves, clever or not." It's a clumsy line, but you feel the warmth in it. Love is rarely elegant. It's more like spilled porridge, messy, but filling. Now, historically speaking, peasants who were elevated to noble favor often faced this exact crossroads. Records from medieval Europe show that commoners who rose in court through wit, artistry, or sometimes sheer luck, were always caught between two lives. On one hand, opportunity, security, and influence. On the other, suspicion, resentment, and the ache of leaving simple roots behind. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some 16th century German folk tales warn that peasants elevated to nobility might literally forget how to work their own fields. One tale jokes that a once brilliant shepherd, given silks and servants, later returned home unable to milk a cow without hiring someone to hold the bucket. It's folklore's way of saying, don't get too big for your boots. And here's where scholars disagree. Does the farmer's clever daughter ultimately stay at court in the oldest versions of the tale, or does she go back home? Some versions suggest she marries into nobility. Others hint she returns to her fields, proving her wisdom lies in refusing gilded cages. Folklorists scratch their heads, debating whether the happily ever after is meant to be found in velvet halls or in muddy gardens. But tonight, you notice something subtler. She looks at the stars as though she's bargaining with them, weighing choices silently. For a moment she crouches, plucks a small daisy growing between cracks of stone and twirls it idly. A daisy, simple, humble, fragile. Yet it has survived where marble and mortar cracked. She tucks it into her braid, a secret nod to herself. Then she turns back toward the hall. "I'll stay," she tells her father softly. "But not forever. Let's see what cleverness is worth in a place built on crowns." The farmer nods, though you catch the glimmer of relief in his eyes, like a man reassured the spirit didn't swallow her whole after all. He pats her shoulder awkwardly, then ambles off to find his way among polished corridors that smell far too much like beeswax. And you sense it too. The story isn't ending just because the spirit slunk away. It's shifting gears, sliding from riddle contests into something quieter, more human. Choices, consequences, and the eternal balancing act between where you come from and where you are going.
Morning arrives like a careful guest, slipping gold light through the tall windows of the hall. The farmer's daughter is already awake, seated by a long wooden table. A single candle sputters beside her, though it has lost its job to the dawn. She doesn't yawn, though you know she's tired. Cleverness weighs more than stone when you've carried it through a night of riddles and spirits. Breakfast at court is quieter than you'd think. No boisterous laughter, no jugs slammed onto oak, just the soft scrape of bread on trenchers and the delicate crack of boiled eggs. She eats little, mostly berries and milk, as though too much finery would stick in her throat. Still, you can see the nobles watching her with curious eyes, measuring how a farmer's daughter fits among silk sleeves and jeweled goblets. When the king finally enters, crown slightly askew, because honestly, who wears those things comfortably before coffee, he pauses to look at her. Then, in that kingly voice that tries very hard to sound natural, he announces, "This hall is safer because of her." No flourish, no proclamation of titles, just that. And you can feel the ripple it makes, quiet but undeniable, moving across the gathered company. She bows her head, not too low, not too proud, and whispers, "Thank you." You can almost hear the spirit's laughter echoing faintly in the rafters, as though the trickster wasn't entirely gone, but merely waiting for a new game in another kingdom. Clever beings rarely retire, they just find new puzzles. Now, historically, clever daughters are a recurring theme in European folklore, from Russia's Vasilisa to Italy's resourceful maidens. Storytellers often placed wit above beauty, making intelligence the true weapon against danger. Scholars suggest these tales served as subtle encouragement for young women in societies where cleverness was rarely rewarded openly. At the same time, some argue the tales were warnings. Wit might grant survival, but rarely without cost. A quirky fact for you. In some German variants, the daughter is eventually asked to leave court quietly because the nobles feel unsettled by someone who can outthink them all. It's the medieval version of, "We love you at parties, but please don't ruin poker night." And here's the ongoing debate. Was the farmer's daughter's cleverness meant to uplift her as a model of wisdom, or was it a cautionary tale that clever women disrupt order? Folklorists never quite agree. Perhaps it's both, a reminder that wit is survival, but also a power that unsettles the balance of traditional roles. As you sit with these musings, you watch her rise from the table. She doesn't rush, doesn't stumble. She moves as though each step is measured, carrying the memory of the spirit's riddles and the weight of her choice to stay. And in that steady walk, you sense the essence of the story. Cleverness isn't only in the winning, it's in the living that comes after. She looks out the tall window toward fields far away and smiles faintly. The daisies will still bloom when she returns, but for now she is here, among velvet, among crowns, among whispers, and she will not be forgotten.
The scene softens, like brushstrokes fading at the edge of a painting. The hall, the daughter, the spirit's shadow, they all blur into gentle outlines, leaving only the feeling of them, the sense of a story that has wound its way from trickery to triumph to quiet choices. And now we drift into a slower rhythm. Your breath deepens, shoulders loosening, as though even you have set down the riddles. The fields beyond the castle seem to stretch endlessly, their green rolling folds like a blanket tucked carefully around you. The wind that moves through them is steady and low, carrying with it the smell of earth, hay, and wildflowers. The clever daughter's voice lingers, soft, like someone telling a secret not meant to trouble, but to comfort. She reminds you, without words, that wisdom is not about loud victories, but about subtle survival, about carrying your roots wherever you go. Her laughter blends with the hush of the breeze, the gentle rattle of leaves, the distant call of a bird just stirring to greet the day. And as you lie there, listening, you feel the edges of the story dissolve. The lines blur, colors soften, and soon there is only the calm rhythm of night folding itself into day, and day yielding back to night, a rhythm older than any tale, older than kings or spirits, older even than riddles. So rest now. Let the clever daughter keep watch for you, her daisy tucked safe in her hair. Let the spirit slink away into forgotten corners where puzzles lose their teeth, and let yourself drift, slowly, gently, like a leaf floating on quiet water. Good night, and sweet dreams, and sweet dreams, and sweet dreams.